Hello and welcome to my zero waste kombucha leather cultivation experiment video, where I will show you how I grew tailor-shaped kombucha leather garment pieces using digital pattern software. So these are the materials I used. We have a 1 litre measuring jug, a pan that can hold 2 litres preferably, some Yorkshire tea bags, we're going to use 2 of those, granulated sugar, a plastic container with a lid, a piece of fabric, some clips to keep that fabric attached, some organic apple cider vinegar with the mother, and some universal indicator strips, and we want the kombucha to be between 3 and 4 pH, and lastly a SCOBY mother. As for the method, I boiled 2 tea bags in 2 litres of water and then measured out 200 grams of the granulated sugar. And you want to leave the water to boil for 15 minutes, and then after that pour the sugar into the tea and then just give it a stir until it's all dissolved. Then you want to pour the tea solution into a sterilised plastic container and then place the lid on to cool, but you want to leave a little bit of a gap so that some condensation can get out. In the meantime, this is how I made my garment blocker. So I started off by making a basic pattern in Clo 3D, and then I had this laser cut out of some plywood. Then I did an initial experiment using the garment molds with an agar bioplastic, but agar tends to shrink during the drying process, so it didn't really work, but I could see where the vision was going. Then using the garment shape, I cut this out of a sheet of EVA foam, which could then be used as a blocker on top of the liquid. So now back to the kombucha. I measured out 200 millilitres of the apple cider vinegar, then poured this into the now cool tea solution. And now it's time to add in the SCOBY, and you just want to take it out and then pop it in the liquid. Then using the universal indicator strip, I just wanted to test the pH, so pop it in the liquid and you can see that it is 3, so we are good to go. So then I just placed the blocker on the liquid and then covered the container with a bit of fabric. So because it takes 4 weeks to grow the kombucha leather, here is one I made at home. So it was in a bigger container, about 5 litres, but it did have all of the garment blockers in it. So here I am separating the SCOBY pellicle from the blockers. The pellicle is the layer that forms at the surface of the liquid that can be harvested and then made into the kombucha leather. Here you can see that the blockers were successful and I managed to grow some garment pattern shapes. So I'm just removing the rest of the pellicles and then we can get on to the processing of the leather. With the remaining pellicles, I gathered them up and put them in a glass container with some of the leftover kombucha liquid. So here is my Booch Hotel. So the first processing step is to wash the kombucha shapes in some soapy water to get rid of any gunk that might be left over from the growing process. I didn't grow the sleeves with the rest of the pan pieces, so I decided to cut them out of a leftover pellicle. And once these were cut out, I washed those in soapy water as well. Now with all the pattern pieces, we want to give them a quick rinse with just some clean water, just to get rid of any soap residue. Then just using a bit of kitchen roll, just gonna give each of the kombucha pellicles a pat dry. Now that all of the pieces are dry, I'm just scooping some coconut oil into a plastic container and microwaving it until it is melted. Now I'm just gonna brush this melted coconut oil onto the pattern piece and rub it in with my hands so that the pellicle is fully moisturized, and then leave it to dry next to a fan. So after 3 days of drying, here is the finished material. It is very malleable and it has a nice colour and a nice texture. So just to compare to the original garment shapes, you can see that there's not a lot of shrinkage on the back and the front panels. Now there is more shrinkage with the sleeve shapes, but I did have to trim them as they're a bit rough around the edges after I cut them from the garment shapes. So now it is time to sew the garment pieces together. I am hand sewing the pieces as I didn't want my sewing machine to damage the material, and vice versa, I didn't want the leather to break my sewing machine. So yeah, hand sewing seemed like the most delicate way to approach this. So now I've attached the front panels at the sleeves, it's time to sew up the sides. So I'm just clipping it in place and then hand sewing again. So I'm using a lapped seam to join the garment pieces together, just because it was the easiest to use for this material and it gives it just a little bit extra durability. So here is the final garment. I didn't add the sleeves because I didn't add a seam allowance to the digital pattern, so the sleeves couldn't fit, but overall it's created a very nice leather vest. So I did end up experimenting with the sewing machine on the spare sleeve pieces, and it turns out it works incredibly well, so I'll definitely be using that for next time.